This is the QAV S2 Johnny FPV Special Edition drone. It's an extremely capable cinematic or freestyle platform with some very cool features like front and rear camera mounts. Lumineer is offering this drone as a build kit, not a bind and fly, so you can't actually buy this drone, but you can build it. Now that the DJI O3 has come down in price, it's a great time to do a DJI O3 build. And if you want yours to perform as the designers intended, I'll link to the recommended parts below. In this video, I'm going to give you guys a real close look at this drone, and by the end, you'll have a better idea of whether or not this drone is for you. This is a 5-inch drone, but there's also a 7-inch, which has longer arms, a brace between the arms, and obviously it's going to have different kV on the motors to spin those larger props. If you're on the fence between 5-inch and 7-inch, a 7-inch is going to give you more efficiency, longer flights, a higher payload capacity to carry heavy batteries and heavy cameras, but a 5-inch is going to be more maneuverable and better for freestyle. It's going to be more portable and lightweight. It's also going to be more cost effective because with both props and batteries, as you go up in size, they get quite a bit more expensive. Whether you're interested in the 7-inch or the 5-inch, keep watching because the frame is basically the same. Full disclosure, Lumineer did send me the frame, stack, and motors for this build. I put in everything else, and as in all my reviews, I reserve the right to say any damn thing that pops into my head. And if you have any questions about this drone or anything else, just leave me a comment and I'll do my best to answer them. All right, let's get into it. All right, you guys, the things that really make this drone stand out are the X-Lock system down here, this rear assembly, these new Johnny FPV 2307 motors, and the Axis Flying Argus 7 Pro stack. The frame comes in at about 133 grams, and my build weighs 459 grams, but that's with the rear camera mount. I am using a nano GPS unit and a self-powered buzzer. With a 1300 milliamp 6S battery, my all-up weight is 692 grams. The X-Lock system down here is really very cool. It uses an aluminum X plate to hold the arms in place, and then this aluminum wedge piece locks them down. When it's locked in place, there's absolutely no play at all in those arms. It's super solid, yet if you back off this M3 screw, each arm will come free with a single screw. And another cool thing is that if you remove this aluminum wedge, you can actually fold the arms back for traveling or to throw in your bag. It's a very cool design that's simple and effective, and I think it has an edge over other systems that use a carbon plate to lock the arms in place because carbon can wear out over time. Another very cool feature of this drone is this rear assembly back here. It uses 4 aluminum pieces with a captured XT60 for this structure, and they give you 5 different carbon plates. I've got the one made for the DJI O3 antenna or a similar single antenna VTX with a rear mounted GoPro. Besides the plate that comes installed on your drone, which will probably be this standard plate, you get 4 more for a total of 5. 2 of the plates are designed for mounting a GPS. You can use some double-sided tape and a zip tie. And you get another camera plate, but this one has the 2 holes for a dual antenna VTX. Now normally I would mount my GPS back here, but since I do have the option of a rear mounted camera, I wanted to take advantage of that feature, and it's a lot of fun to get some unique shots with a camera back there. It does mean that I had to mount my nano GPS on the arm, which works out okay. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. Another advantage of this rear assembly is that you've got the XT60 back here on the assembly instead of being on the top plate. What that means is if you've got a heavy camera up front, like say a full GoPro, you have the freedom to move your battery all the way back in order to balance center of gravity. The FPV camera mount is soft mounted and it's really very flexible. It uses these 2 carbon plates bolted onto the aluminum standoff, and what that means is not only can you tilt your camera up and down, but you can also move it forward or backward.
And that's pretty useful if you want to have your camera protected a little bit more, or if you want to try to avoid getting props in view. Although I have to mention that I pretty much always had props in view in my DJI O3 footage, at least in the wide setting that I like to use in GyroFlow. Although with my GoPro, I used a GoPro Mini and I didn't have any problems with props in view, even using that super wide 8:7 aspect ratio. The way I see the decision to use an X design is that it's the best of both worlds for serious FPV pilots. The True X is going to give you the best flight characteristics possible, and if you're serious about your image quality, you're using a GoPro anyway. What do you guys think about this design choice? Is the DJI O3 footage good enough for you? Let me know in the comments. I do have a video comparing GoPro 11 mini footage and the DJI O3 footage side by side if you're interested. One of the best parts about this drone are these new Johnny FPV 2307 1750 kV motors. They're new, released with this quad, and they're friggin' huge for a 5-inch. The traditional size for a 5-inch quad is usually 2207 or 2306. And most people agree that 2306s are going to be a little bit smoother and a little bit more efficient, while 2207s are going to be a little bit more responsive. Well, these 2307s are basically giving you the best of both worlds, and it's a great choice if you want some insane power for freestyle or if you plan to carry some heavy cameras or batteries. They are 1750 kV, which means they're still smooth and efficient on 6S, even though they have a larger than normal stator size with some insane torque and lifting power. For this build, I am using an Axis Flying stack with an F7 flight controller and 55 amp ESCs running BL Heli 32 with PWM frequency up to 96 kilohertz. This flight controller has a BM1270 gyro and 6 UARTs. It does have dual BECs, one with 5 volt 2 amp and one with 9 volt 2 amp. So for digital systems like the DJI O3, you've got plenty of power and you don't have to worry about brownouts. This flight controller does have plugs everywhere, so if you're building up this drone, you can avoid doing some soldering, or if you end up with the bind and fly, maybe if you want to add a GPS later or upgrade your receiver or what have you, it makes that process quick and simple. You do get several cables in the box. I think I counted something like 8 cables. This flight controller also has iNav support, which is pretty cool, especially for that 7-inch version of this drone. Also, I really like the indicator lights on this stack. Most flight controllers have some sort of indicator lights to help you diagnose problems, but they're usually located on top of the board where you can't see them when the drone is assembled. On this flight controller, they're really bright and well placed so you can actually see them. All right, you guys, quick public service announcement. Axis Flying has 2 versions of this stack available. There's a Pro version and a non-Pro version. The Pro version is covered with heat sinks and it's a little bit taller, which means it does not fit into this frame, at least not very easily without some modifications. One of my subscribers pointed this out to me because they bought the Pro version of the stack and it didn't fit into the frame. The reason why I'm pointing this out to you guys is there seems to be some confusion in the naming, because as you can see, my box says Pro on it, but the stack does not have those heat sinks. If you're planning on building up this drone, make sure you get the stack without the heat sinks, because that one I can guarantee fits in this frame. All right, you guys, now I want to show you a few things that are specific to my build. I did use this nylon tubing and heat shrink to wrap my motor wires. That's mostly an aesthetic choice, but I do like to do it sometimes because it makes the build look more finished and it does protect those motor wires. I actually use this cloth tape that you can get on Amazon. I think it's called wire harness tape when I was test fitting my components, and to be completely honest, it works just fine. It protects your motors, it keeps everything organized, and it's even more practical if you ever have to swap out a motor quickly. It just doesn't look quite as finished. I am using a Flyfish Nano GPS unit mounted to the arm. Normally, I would mount my GPS unit onto one of these rear plates, but I wanted to take advantage of this rear camera mount. If you don't plan to use that rear camera mount, you'll definitely want to mount your GPS back here because you're going to get better reception that way. Since this is a nano GPS unit mounted on the arm, it's not going to get the best reception, but it does give me plenty of satellites to make GPS rescue work in beta flight. It would probably get better reception if it was mounted back here or even on the battery strap, but I do have it angled back slightly. Let's see if you can see that. So when the quad is flying forward, it's pointed up, which is what you want. I am using TBS Crossfire, and I've got my Immortal T zip tied to the front of the frame. There is clearance between the antenna and the carbon of the frame, but not a ton. If you're using ELRS, you could zip tie the antenna right here to the front of the frame, or you could also zip tie it to one of the arms. My receiver is wrapped in heat shrink to protect it, and it's facing down, zip tied to the bottom of the frame so I can access the bind button right here. I'm actually using another zip tie right here on the Immortal T so it doesn't want to tilt up and interfere with the FPV camera. I'm also using a self-powered buzzer. It's zip tied to the front of the frame and it's facing inward, so I've got access to the bind button right here. These things are not completely necessary, but they make it a little bit easier to find your quad in a crash. I installed my capacitor in the rear underneath the bottom plate. Normally I install my capacitor behind the flight controller, soldered directly to the ESC's power leads. But in this case, I just had no space back there. It's pretty congested. The wires going all over the place. I also tried installing it up front, and that would work also, but it turns out that I needed that space for my receiver and my self-powered buzzer. Installing it in the back here has the advantage of the leads being extremely short. They're only maybe half an inch or maximum an inch. And it's also protected by this bottom plate. So it should be safe back there. I have it zip tied with a piece of double-sided tape, so it's not going anywhere. I'm pretty happy with that solution. If you're looking to build up this frame, I have a few tips that I learned from my build. First of all, be careful to cut your battery leads just the right length for this XT60 connector. Too long or too short will put pressure on your ESC. Also remember that the design of this rear assembly means that you need a little bit of extra slack in that battery lead, because as it tilts forward or backward, it'll push or pull on your battery lead. The aluminum mount for the air unit gives you a nice convenient niche underneath the air unit to route your cables and keep things nice and clean. If you're using the Axis Flying Argus stack, the ESC comes set with a PWM frequency of 24 kilohertz, which is going to interfere with the stabilization in your DJI-O3 camera. So when you're updating your ESC software, don't forget to change that to 48 or 96 kilohertz or whatever you want. Otherwise, you're going to have problems with your DJI-O3. All right, you guys, here's what I really like about this drone. First of all, the X-Lock system is awesome. I really like it. The rear assembly has loads of flexibility, and that rear camera mount is a lot of fun to play with. I also really like that the XT60 connector is back there because I've got lots of space to mount my battery. The front camera mount gives you flexibility to position your FPV camera the way you want, including using different size FPV cameras. You do get an extra set of camera plates for cameras with different dimensions. I also really like these molded plastic GoPro mounts. I think molded plastic can be stronger than TPU, and what's really nice about this design is there's a single screw and then the mount will pop right out of the frame. That means that if you're running a rear camera back here and you need to push your battery all the way forward to balance center of gravity, you can do that quickly in the field. Another thing that's really nice is that Lumineer is based in the US. That means that if you break an arm or if you have a problem and you need some support, you can contact them and they'll get back to you. One of my favorite drones to fly is the GepRC Mark V Dead Cat, and you've probably seen my build and review video on the channel. However, I had a crash and I broke this rear arm here. It happens to all of us, right? Unfortunately, I checked all the US-based FPV stores and none of them had replacement arms for this drone in stock. I ordered it from GepRC and it's on its way, but unfortunately it'll take about a month to get to me. The nice thing about this drone from Lumineer, first of all, with 6mm arms, you're not likely to break them. But if you do break an arm, you can order one from GetFPV, and they're based in Florida, which means they'll get you that replacement part pretty quickly. All right, you guys, even though there's a ton to like about this drone, it's not perfect, and there are a few things that I noticed while I've been flying it. First of all, this XT60 back here on the rear plate, it has the advantage of freeing up space on the top plate to mount your battery, but I found that with some batteries, the lead isn't long enough to reach the XT60 comfortably without putting strain on the battery lead while still balancing center of gravity. You kind of have to mount it back here. That works out great if you've got a GoPro mounted up front, but let's say you want to use this rear camera mount. Well, you need to move your battery way up front in order to balance center of gravity. The only way to solve that for me was to make up a little extension like this. This is actually the XT60 lead that came with my flight controller. This goes in like that, gives me a little bit more space and a little bit more freedom to balance center of gravity. I don't think it would be fair to call that a design flaw. It's just the price you pay to have an XT60 mounted on the rear plate. If the battery lead had come out the side right here, it wouldn't be an issue, but then you'd run the risk of having your battery lead chopped in the props. Having it back here is much safer, and I really do like this design, but the trade-off is that I have to use this extension in some situations in order to balance center of gravity, and that means additional points of failure. If you're interested in the 7-inch version of this drone, or if you just like massive batteries, you could use a parallel cable like this in order to run 2 batteries in parallel. One of my favorite features of this drone is the rear assembly with these interchangeable plates. It's innovative, it's flexible, and it's very cool. It's a real reason to go with this drone over some of the other options that are out there. However, there is a however. It doesn't seem like it would be the most survivable option in a crash. Compared to, say, TPU that other drones are using, aluminum seems like it could get bent or have these small screws get stripped out here or have this carbon plate crack at this stress point right here. To be fair, it is lightweight, it looks very cool, and if you were to break this, Get FPV has the replacement parts available. These 4 aluminum pieces are available for $20, but if you broke the captured XT60 connector, you'd have to buy an entire hardware kit for $22. Another thing is that the flight controller that I'm using for my build has plugs everywhere, but hardly any pads. Now, plugs are great for beginners because it avoids the need to solder, but if any of those plugs go bad, you're out of luck. On another stack, I had a DJI plug go bad, and I solved the problem by just soldering to the pads. You do get a pair of these super high quality, indestructible Lumineer battery straps, but I find they're a little bit short for me. They measure 22 centimeters long, and I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I need a little bit more length and girth in my straps, and these freebies from Race Day Quad are the straps that I end up using most of the time because they're more like 25.5 centimeters. And to put it in perspective, an 1100 milliamp 6S will work on the shorter straps. The 1300 milliamp 6S will work, but you're starting to notice how short it is. But for a 1500 milliamp 6S or above, you really need longer straps. Of course, this varies by battery manufacturer. If you have a different brand of batteries, your experience may vary. Another thing that I mentioned in my frame review video is that the hardware kit that you get with the Quav S2 is pretty sparse. You get the hardware required to assemble the drone, and that's about it. Most other manufacturers do include quite a bit of extra hardware in the box, and that's nice because if you lose a screw or if someone makes a mistake filling up that hardware bag, you're not going to be grounded until you can find that exact size and length of screw you need. So I think Lumineer could have been a little bit more generous with their hardware kit. Another thing to take into account is that it's pretty hard to avoid getting props in view in your DJI O3 footage. Now, if you're running a GoPro, it doesn't really matter. But if you plan to get usable footage from your DJI O3, keep in mind you're pretty much always going to see the props, at least with the settings that I used for GyroFlow. So don't forget that this is an X frame, not a dead cat frame. All right, you guys, to sum it up, I love this drone. I really appreciate the quality of the materials and the design innovations that went into it, and it flies great. But it's going to be up to you to decide whether or not you can justify the premium price point. After all, there is some pretty stiff competition on the market from other manufacturers. You could get about 3 SpeedyBee Mario 5 frames for the same price as one of these frames, or you can get an extremely capable cinematic FPV drone from another trusted manufacturer like GepRC or iFlight. However, the Quav S2 does have an edge when it comes to the quality of the materials, the thicker arms, and the US-based product support. I'll sum up this review by saying if you're in the market for one of the best freestyle or cinematic FPV drones that money can buy, you're going to want to have a long, hard look at the Quav S2 Johnny FPV edition from Lumineer. All right, you guys, thanks a lot for watching. I appreciate having you guys here, and I'll see you in the next one.